Hi everyone, let's work on TOEFL Speaking Task 3 today. I'll show you what to write down for the reading material and how to take notes based on the points you jot down from the reading. As I've emphasized in other videos, finding 3 points in the reading is essential because they guide you to identify the key information in the lecture. These 3 points typically include the following: definition of the concept in question, 2, reasons behind it, 3, outcomes or effects when the concept is in action. For example, consider the concept of groupthink. Definition: group members conform to a bad group consensus. Reason: fear of not being viewed as a team player. Outcome: negative outcomes for the group. These 3 points guide your listening, and your answer must include all 3 points.
Now listen to part of a lecture on this topic in a business management class.
So, let me tell you about my own experience with this when I was working for a computer company a couple of years ago. So, one day a coworker and I suggested we should give our computers a design makeover, make them look more up to date. Market research was showing that new customers said they would be more interested in buying our computers if they looked cooler. Our technology was advanced, but the outside design looked really old-fashioned. At first, more than half the group supported us. There were a few senior managers there, though, who didn't support the design change. One of the senior managers said, "Our focus has always been on technology. Changing the look is an unnecessary cost." Almost immediately, some of our supporters changed their minds. Even my coworker changed his mind. When I asked him why after the meeting, he told me he didn't want to make a bad impression on the senior managers. He thought that disagreeing with them might jeopardize his chances of getting a promotion by not looking like a team player. What about me? I hate to admit it, but after a few hours of discussion, I started wondering if it was worth everyone's time to argue about this. As more people sided with senior management, I started to feel like I was the only one holding up the vote. Everyone else seemed to think change wasn't necessary, so I voted against my own idea in the end. So we unanimously decided to stay with the current old-looking design. But this decision ended up costing us a lot of money. That same year, our competitor came out with a new design that attracted some of our customers and prevented us from profiting on potential new customers.
In the lecture, the professor shared a personal anecdote about working at a computer company. He and a coworker suggested giving a computer design makeover to make their computers more appealing to customers. While the majority of his colleagues initially supported the idea, senior managers opposed it, considering it unnecessary. As a result, his colleagues, including his coworker, changed their minds and sided with the senior managers, fearing it might jeopardize their chance of promotion. To avoid appearing uncooperative, the professor also agreed with the senior managers. Unfortunately, this turned out to be a poor decision as the company lost customers to rivals who embraced the design makeover. This summary effectively captures the reasons and outcomes of groupthink. When combining the reading and listening into a sample response, avoid empty phrases like "the article and lecture are about groupthink." This approach doesn't add value because the question already provides that information. Instead, start directly with what groupthink is and then add reasons and outcomes like this. Groupthink refers to a phenomenon where individuals agree with what they believe is the group consensus, even though individually they wouldn't make that decision. This phenomenon occurs because people are afraid of not being seen as team players and being perceived as uncooperative. The outcome of groupthink is almost always detrimental to the group as a whole. These 3 sentences can be condensed into one sentence like this. Groupthink, which refers to a phenomenon where individuals conform to perceived group consensus despite personal reservations, often stems from fear of being labeled uncooperative, resulting in detrimental outcomes for the group as a whole. Okay, this is a sample response.
Groupthink refers to a situation where individuals in a group attempt to conform their opinions to what they perceive as the group decision, even if they personally believe it to be a poor choice. They do so out of fear of not being viewed as cooperative team members. The professor provides an anecdotal example to illustrate this concept. Years ago, he worked for a computer company where he and his coworker proposed giving their computers a design makeover, believing that customers would prefer modern designs. Initially, most colleagues agreed. However, senior managers disagreed with the proposal, leading colleagues to change their minds to align with management. Eventually, the coworker and the professor themselves voted against their own proposal, fearing potential repercussions such as not being promoted. This unanimous group decision proved to be detrimental, as they lost prospective customers to a rival company that had upgraded its design.
Next, let's consider a more challenging example. First, read the passage. The reading defines the method of Loki and explains how to use it. The method of Loki is a memory technique used to remember information in a particular order. The reading outlines the process in 3 steps. 1. Think of a familiar place with landmarks through which you walk in a specific order. 2. Associate each landmark with the information you want to remember. To recall the information, imagine walking through the place and remember what each landmark represents.
Listen to part of a lecture on this topic.
So, how would this work? Well, let's say you need to learn the names of the planets, in order by distance from the sun. So first, think about the landmarks you pass as you walk from, say, your dormitory to the student center. The first one might be the front door of your dormitory, then the big tree in front of the dorm. The next landmark you pass might be the statue in front of the library. Next, the steps to the science building. You get the idea. You memorize the major points along the walk, imagining yourself going from the first landmark to the second, the third, and so on. Now, the next thing you do is assign one planet to each of your landmarks, in sequence. Since Mercury is the closest planet to the Sun, you assign it to the first landmark, the front door of your dorm. The next planet, Venus, to the tree in front of the dorm. The third planet, Earth, you assign to the third landmark, the statue in front of the library, and so on and so on. And each time you picture the association in your mind as vividly as possible. Then, later, say you're sitting in the classroom taking a test, and you have to write the order of the planets from the sun. What do? You imagine yourself on that familiar walk to the student center, passing each landmark as usual. When you think about walking out the door of your dorm, you're reminded of Mercury. When you see the beautiful tree in front of the dorm, you think of Venus. At each landmark along the way, you recall the next planet and write it down.
In the lecture, the method is exemplified with memorizing the order of planets. The professor uses the path from a dormitory to a student center as an example. He identifies landmarks along the route, like the dorm's front door, a tree, and a statue. Then he associates each landmark with a planet. Mercury with the dorm's front door, Venus with a tree, and so on. To recall the planets in order, imagine walking from the dormitory to the center, visualizing the landmarks and their associated planets. Here's a sample response.
The method of loci is a memory technique used to remember multiple pieces of information in a specific sequence. To employ this method, you initially identify landmarks along a familiar route and then associate each landmark with the information you wish to recall. Later, to retrieve the information in order, you mentally walk through the familiar route. For instance, to memorize the order of planets from the sun, you might map out a path from your dormitory to the student center. In your imagined walking through the path, you think about landmarks like the dorm's front door, a tree, a statue, and so forth. Then, you associate each landmark with a planet in the solar system's order. For example, Mercury is linked to the first landmark, Venus to the second, and so on. When you need to recall the order of planets, you mentally retrace your steps from your dorm to the student center. As you pass each landmark, you can easily recall the associated planet.
Okay, that's all I have today. I'm Dr. Nani Burns. And let me know if you have any questions.